These beans just keep on producing. Yesterday I wandered through the aisles of the supermarket locally here in Tassie, and like so many supermarkets throughout the world, the aisles were fairly empty. People were searching for food that wasn't there. I understand why. People are feeling threatened by the pandemic that's beginning to unfold. But one of the main reasons that they are searching in the supermarket for their food is that they haven't taken out insurance on their food supply. It's strange. Most people have insurance on their car in case they lose it, some way of replacing it, or they have insurance for their house in case it burns down. The odds of a house burning down, I believe, is around about, well, in Australia anyway, this is the case, about 1 in 100 that you will have a house burned down in your lifetime. So most times the insurance company is winning. When I talk about food insurance, what am I talking about? Well, some people will recognise that I'm not using precisely the correct word, because what I'm actually talking about is ensuring your food supply, not insuring it. Yes, you can't go to a company and give them money and they will take care of you. It doesn't work like that. We tend to treat the government in that way though. We pay our taxes and we expect them to care for us, and I suppose we think of that as our food insurance. But when it comes down to it, government has a lot more to think about than just us as individuals. If you think back to the time of our grandparents and before that, people were more in touch with their food supply. They didn't just rely on the shops because the shops didn't have the food that they needed. And settlers, they grew their own food. And not only did they grow the food, but they also had the skills and the knowledge as to how to store food over time, how to preserve it. And they practiced that. People would bottle the fruit every season. Even when I was a child, there'd be a lot of people. We had some huge plum trees, and people would come and pick plums because there was way more plums than we could ever cope with, and bottle every season. Now, we've totally lost that as modern society has made us more and more reliant on the supermarket. And I think it's a really big mistake that we've lost those skills, and we need to redevelop them. We need to have some self-reliance, some self-sufficiency, and think about how we can care for our own food supply and ensure that we can feed ourselves and our families. So how do you do that? Well, personally, I began that journey 20 years ago by purchasing this land that's under my feet. Because soil, after all, is where our life comes from. The second step that I took was to actually plant fruit trees. Fruit trees are a long-term investment. You're looking at production, years into the future from when you plant them. And if you don't make that investment, don't make those down payments on your insurance, you're not going to get the crop at the end. The third thing is to actually grow a veggie garden like this and do it on a continual basis, because that way I gain the knowledge about growing conditions, how to do it. Look, there are preppers, I've watched the doomsday prepper shows, and look, there are probably a few in this category, though they exaggerate, that have seed stored away with that plan that when the troubles come, I'll grow a garden. Well, the reality is that soil doesn't instantly yield. Well, you can dig up your lawn, and look, I recommend that you do, and plant your vegetables, but your yield will not be as good as it would be if you were continually doing it and developing that soil. Also, one of the things is that when the shortage comes, like it is there at the moment, it takes time for things to produce. You can put that seed in, but you're waiting weeks, months before you actually get a crop. If you have a garden growing on a continual basis, you can just go out, as I am here, and pick that food, and you're going to know how to maintain that and keep it ongoing. The fourth thing that I've done is to devote a fair amount of my time and energy to preservation of food. I do it every year as the harvest comes in, to actually bottle fruits and dry foods, look at other ways, making tomato sauce and things like this, that you're actually utilising that produce that you get from the garden and to store it over longer term. That way the food is there. What is my message? Well, it's basically this, that if you haven't already done it, you can ensure, and I'm not saying insure, but ensure your food supply by going out and digging up the lawn. Look, hopefully you've done it by now, but if you haven't, go and dig it up. Get some seeds and plant some vegetables. Now, you're going to need to try and get some compost and some fertilizer to actually make sure it produces. You're not going to get, as I said earlier, the same crop as you would if you'd been growing regularly. Now, if you are a gardener and have it regularly going, well, go and invest your time in it, because it will reward you. The second thing is, yes, go and buy some fruit trees. Put them in. If you haven't got space because you're in a suburban situation, plant some espaliers. You can grow espaliers and cordons along buildings and fences. They will still produce and do it in a much smaller space. Look, it's a long-term investment. You're not going to get something from those fruit trees now. I think one of the messages that we all need to take away from this pandemic, look, it will pass, but we need to change the way we live. We need to no longer be reliant on supermarkets and expect them to have the food when we need it. The reality is that isn't the case. Our society is far more complex and has become fragile now because of its complexity, and it doesn't take much to shake it. At the moment, the food supply is still coming into the supermarkets, but you think of what would happen if the transport was interrupted. They would be empty and there would be no refilling, and then you're on your own. So make that long-term investment. Put in the fruit trees, grow a veggie garden, keep it going, make it a habit. Don't just do it for the duration of the pandemic. Look, I think a mistake that people have made is, like in World War II, in Britain especially, they went out and dug for victory. They actually dug up the lawns and the parks, and they planted vegetables, but they lost the habit. Once the war had passed, they fall back to relying on shops and other people and farmers. We need to be more self-reliant and think about how we as individuals can ensure our own food supply. Look, if you're in an apartment on the 20th floor, it's probably too late for this pandemic, but you do need to think about what you're going to do after, how you're going to change the way you live. You need to get out of that situation and come back and be in touch with the soil. So that's my message. Look, I'm quite passionate about this because I think we all need to come back to the soil and grow our own foods. And then the panic shopping that's going on at the moment becomes unnecessary. You'll go to your garden and harvest as you need and plant and keep the cycle going.